I want to play Binding of Isaac. So it turns out I'm bad at Binding of Isaac. So there's two ways to approach this. One is I continue to play, eventually, learn all the items, improve my skills, and then beat the game. Or two, I don't do any of that, and I instead put my time and effort into making my own roguelike, even though I have limited game dev experience. There's an obvious answer. So before I even start coding, I need a theme. And I figured I could put my years of farmhand experience to use and make the game about farmers.
That's not catchy enough.
There's tons of farmer games. So while I try to think of how to expand this idea, I'll draw a tomato. And I might as well code something, so I started up a Godot project and I created a player character who can move and shoot. I then made a few basic enemies who just continuously move towards the player, and they can also be killed. I also added basic collision boxes, so they can just push each other around. So, while making the enemies, I figured out the rest of the theme. You play as Farmer Dave, who is using fresh produce to fight fast food, or junk food, and technology. It needs some tweaking, but I figure it's enough to move forward from here. I quickly made an enemy sprite, which was just a totally generic bag of chips, and then I put it in the game. And then right after that, I made a very temporary farmer sprite. I then added a very basic start menu, and also added the ability for the player to actually die. I was very quickly getting tired of the boring gray backdrop, so I made a rather techy factory-style floor, and I put it in. That looks
Awful.
okay. I made the squares smaller, and I added walls, so it honestly looks a lot better. Then I also updated the health UI. Alright, this is really starting to come together, but there's an important thing missing. Well, okay, actually there's several important things missing, but there's the most important thing missing.
Procedural generation.
So, I actually don't know how to do this, but YouTube does, and I found this incredible video that guides you through basic procedural dungeon generation, and you should totally subscribe to this guy.
And subscribe to me while you're at it.
And my dumb brain forgot to record all of my work at this point, but it was just boring code, so you didn't miss much. Essentially, before we even fill the rooms with information, we generate the dungeon layout. We have an 8x8 grid where each square is a room. We generate a random starting room in that grid, and then we create the critical path, which is a path from the start room to the boss room. I forget what I set the path length to, it's anywhere from 8 to 12, I think. Anyway, every time a room is added to the path, it checks if there are spots open around it. If there are, it's marked as a branch candidate, which means a side path can go off of it. Once the critical path is complete, we can then go through and add 2 to 4 branching paths, which range from 1 to 4 rooms long. At the end of each branch, we mark the last room as a treasure room for later use. Then, that map is saved as a 2-dimensional array that the game uses to track where the player's been, what rooms they've visited, and what to fill each room with. Yeah, and now I just need to make a way to actually travel between the rooms. I made a simple door sprite which can be rotated and placed in scenes, and then I created 15 different rooms based on different door layouts. I made it so when you enter a new room, it spawns the proper room based on door layouts, which is based on surrounding rooms. This was definitely the most buggy period of the game so far. I wish I'd recorded more, I just forgot, but there were so many bugs. Doors would spawn players inside of other doors, which caused infinite teleporting. You had a door would just choose not to work if you came in an opposite door, but not always, just sometimes. Occasionally you go through a door and it would skip you 2 rooms ahead. The list goes on. I ended up fixing the bugs. It was just bad placement of hitboxes and not enough booleans. But now we can travel through a procedurally generated map, and the only issue? The map was empty. So, I added enemies. Okay, so I have 24 possible spawn points for enemies in each room. And on my first test, I accidentally kind of had an enemy spawn on every single spawn, which might be a little unfair for the player, so I'll have to tweak that. I rewrote the code so enemies spawned in different locations based on where the player entered. Currently, each room has the same 3 enemies, but that'll change eventually. I also made it so doors unlock when all enemies are dead, and if you enter a room you've already been in, they spawn open. We now have a kind of playable game. My last thing I added was unique doors based on if the next room was a boss or treasure room, both of which currently don't spawn enemies. I have a lot of work ahead of me, but this was probably the hardest part, as it essentially laid the entire framework. I look forward to continuing this project. I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day.